Dozens of young men, all strong swimmers, all found drowned, and near every body someone had spray-painted a smiley face. Tonight, we trace a pattern police refuse to call a pattern, and by minute 14 you'll see why two retired detectives believe a network of killers is still hunting. It usually begins the same way. A college town on a cold night, a bar closing at 2 in the morning, a young man, athletic, popular, walking home alone after a few drinks with friends. He tells someone he'll text when he gets there. He never does. Days later, sometimes weeks, his body is pulled from a river, a canal, a lake, always cold, always still. The official cause of death is almost always the same 3 words: accidental drowning, alcohol involved. And then, if you know where to look, you find something else. A smiley face, spray-painted on a bridge, a wall, a tree, a rock, somewhere along the water where the body was found. Sometimes red, sometimes black, sometimes with horns, always grinning. This is the case that 2 retired New York City detectives have been chasing for more than 20 years. They believe there is not one killer, but a coordinated network of them, moving through the Midwest and the Northeast, stalking college campuses, drugging young men, and staging their deaths in water. Law enforcement almost universally disagrees. The FBI has publicly stated there is no evidence to support the theory. Local police departments call it insulting to grieving families. And yet, the bodies keep turning up. The smiley faces keep appearing, and the parents of the dead, one after another, keep asking the same question. If my son was such a strong swimmer, if he had no reason to be near the water, how did he end up in it face down? To understand this case, you have to go back to the late 1990s, to a series of drownings in and around La Crosse, Wisconsin. La Crosse sits on the Mississippi River. It is home to 3 colleges, and between 1997 and 2006, at least 8 young male students drowned in the river under circumstances that friends, families, and eventually detectives found deeply strange. The first name most people learn is Richard Hlywa, a University of Wisconsin La Crosse student who vanished in 1997. Then Anthony Skifton in 1999. Then Jeffrey Giese. Then Charles Blatz. Then Jared Dion in 2004, a wrestler, a strong young man, last seen leaving a bar downtown. His body was found in the Mississippi 3 days later. The city was already on edge, and when Luke Homan disappeared in 2006, a basketball player at the College of St. Benedict visiting La Crosse for Oktoberfest, the panic became national. Luke's body was pulled from the river on September 30th, 2006. He had been out with friends, gotten separated, and simply vanished from the streets of downtown La Crosse. The medical examiner ruled it an accidental drowning. But by then, people were already whispering that something was very wrong in La Crosse. Enter Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte. Gannon was a retired NYPD detective sergeant. Duarte was a retired NYPD detective. In 1997, they had investigated the drowning of a young man named Patrick McNeill, a Fordham University student who disappeared after leaving a Manhattan bar. His body was found in the East River 50 days later. The autopsy noted marks consistent with restraint and evidence that his body had been stored somewhere before entering the water. Gannon never accepted the accidental drowning ruling. When he retired, he began compiling other cases: young men, college-aged, athletic, last seen at bars, found in water, and again, that same detail, a smiley face somewhere nearby. By the mid-2000s, Gannon and Duarte had identified what they said were more than 40 cases fitting this pattern, stretching from Boston to Minneapolis. They took their theory public in 2008. The reaction was explosive. Cable news picked it up. Documentaries followed. Parents who had spent years being told their sons simply drank too much and fell into a river suddenly had a name for what they had always suspected: the Smiley Face Killers. And for the families, that name changed everything. But the pushback was immediate and severe. The FBI issued a statement saying it had reviewed the cases and found no evidence connecting them. It suggested that the drownings were the tragic but statistically unsurprising result of intoxicated young men encountering cold water at night. The Center for Homicide Research in Minneapolis published an analysis concluding that the smiley face symbol is one of the most common graffiti tags in the world, and that finding one near a body of water in an urban area proves nothing. Local police, especially in La Crosse, grew openly hostile. The La Crosse Police Department pointed to their own study, which found that in each of the local drownings, the victim's path from the bar to the river was consistent with someone who was intoxicated, lost, and walking in the wrong direction. There was no evidence of abduction, no evidence of struggle, no witnesses reporting anything suspicious. And yet, the details in some of these individual cases are difficult to dismiss. Take the case of Chris Jenkins, a University of Minnesota student who disappeared on Halloween night, 2002. Chris was last seen at a bar in downtown Minneapolis, wearing a Native American costume. He was thrown out of the bar for being intoxicated, and by the time his friends noticed he was missing, he was gone. His body was found in the Mississippi River 4 months later, in February 2003. What made Chris's case different is what happened years afterward. In 2006, the Minneapolis Police Department reclassified his death from accidental drowning to homicide. The reason, according to the department, was information provided by an informant. According to a private investigator working with the Jenkins family, that informant claimed Chris had been kidnapped by a group of men, thrown off a bridge, and murdered. The police have never named a suspect, and the case remains officially open. But the reclassification alone was extraordinary. It confirmed, at least in one case, that the accidental drowning explanation could be wrong. Then there is the case of Dakota James, a young graduate student in Pittsburgh who disappeared in January 2017. Dakota was last seen on surveillance video walking away from a downtown restaurant. He looked composed, he looked sober, he was not stumbling, he was not disoriented. He simply walked out of frame, and 40 days later, his body was recovered from the Ohio River, more than 10 miles downstream from where he was last seen. The medical examiner ruled the death an accidental drowning. But a forensic pathologist hired by the family, Cyril Wecht, one of the most well-known forensic experts in the country, concluded that the state of the body was inconsistent with 40 days in the water. Wecht believed Dakota had been kept somewhere else, possibly in a freezer, before being placed in the river. He also noted marks on the neck that he said were consistent with strangulation. Pittsburgh police disagreed. The case remains officially ruled accidental. But for anyone who has watched that surveillance footage of a healthy, sober young man walking calmly down a city street and then vanishing, the official story feels incomplete. And it keeps happening. In February 2018, Kenny Kane, a student at the University of Missouri, disappeared after leaving a bar in Columbia. His body was found in a nearby lake weeks later. In 2010, Todd Gieb, a Michigan man, vanished after a bonfire. His body was later found in a pond, standing upright, in only 3 feet of water. His last cell phone call before dying said, quote, "I'm in a field." Detectives noted that his phone had pinged towers far from where his body was found. In 2018, in New York City alone, at least 3 young men, all sharing a similar profile, drowned in the Hudson or East Rivers, under circumstances their families found suspicious. And in almost all of these cases, Gannon, Duarte, and the researchers working with them claim to have found a smiley face symbol somewhere along the route. So who are the Smiley Face Killers, according to those who believe the theory? Gannon has said publicly that he believes it is a loosely connected network of men who identify each other through the smiley face symbol and possibly through the dark web. He has claimed, without providing public evidence, that some of the victims tested positive for gamma-hydroxybutyrate, GHB, the so-called date rape drug. He has claimed that some of the bodies show signs of having been kept in cold storage. He has claimed that the killers select their victims by profile: young, male, white in most cases, college-aged, athletic, popular. He has said the motive appears to be something like sport or ritual or the exercise of power over a certain type of young man who represents, in the killer's mind, a certain kind of American success. Critics, and there are many, point out that Gannon has never produced the toxicology reports supposedly showing GHB. They point out that in the vast majority of the cases, there is no forensic evidence of homicide, no defensive wounds, no witnesses, no DNA. They point out that the smiley face is one of the most common images in graffiti, and that of course it appears near urban rivers because it appears near everything urban. They point out that young men, especially college-aged young men, drink heavily, walk home alone, and sometimes make catastrophic decisions near water, and that the statistical rate of such drownings in the demographic is, tragically, exactly what you would expect. And yet the families do not let go. Because there is another category of detail that the skeptics have a harder time explaining. In some cases, victims' cell phones and wallets have been found miles from their bodies, arranged in ways that suggest deliberate placement. In some cases, victims texted friends saying they were being followed, or that they were with someone new, minutes before they disappeared. In some cases, security footage shows a victim being approached by a stranger. In the case of Chris Jenkins, the reclassification to homicide was based, we are told, on the testimony of someone who was there. In the case of Patrick McNeill in 1997, the very first case that put Kevin Gannon on this path, the autopsy findings of possible restraint and pre-mortem storage were made by medical examiners with no connection to any theory. Those findings existed before the theory did. There is also the question of law enforcement's own behavior. In several of these cities, police departments have refused to release full case files. They have refused to publicly address the presence or absence of smiley face graffiti near the recovery sites. They have refused to reopen cases even when families produce new evidence. In Pittsburgh, in the Dakota James case, the family's independent forensic report was dismissed without a detailed public rebuttal. In Crosse, requests for a coordinated review of all the drownings between 1997 and 2006 have been repeatedly denied. Whether that reflects institutional confidence or institutional embarrassment depends on who you ask. In 2019, the Oxygen Network aired a documentary series in which Gannon and Duarte presented what they said was their strongest case to date. They highlighted the death of Dakota James. They showed footage of smiley face graffiti near recovery sites in multiple states. They interviewed families. They interviewed a former witness who claimed to have overheard conversations in a New York bar about a group of men who, quote, hunted college boys. That witness's testimony has never been independently verified. But the documentary reopened the public conversation, and it prompted at least a small number of local police departments to say publicly that they would take a fresh look at their case files. Most of them, of course, did not. And that is where the case sits today, somewhere between conspiracy theory and cold case, between the FBI's clear statement that there is no evidence and the private forensic reports that suggest there might be, between the statistical reality that young men drown and the specific facts of individual cases that refuse to fit the accidental drowning template. Between the mothers and fathers who wake up every morning knowing something is wrong and the police departments that have moved on. What can we say with certainty? We can say that between the late 1990s and today, at least several dozen young men fitting a nearly identical profile have died in bodies of water across the United States. We can say that in a significant minority of those cases, the evidence for accidental drowning is thin, and the evidence for something else is present. We can say that at least one of those deaths, that of Chris Jenkins in Minneapolis, has been officially reclassified as a homicide. We can say that the smiley face symbol has been documented near recovery sites in multiple jurisdictions, though whether that is meaningful or coincidental remains contested. We can say that no serial killer or group of killers has ever been arrested, charged, or identified in connection with these deaths. And we can say this: if Gannon and Duarte are wrong, then dozens of families have been given a false hope, a false monster to blame, when the truth is a quieter and more painful one about alcohol and cold water and the terrible mathematics of a night gone wrong. But if they are right, even partly right, even in only a handful of cases, then somewhere out there is at least one killer, or a group of them, who has spent more than 20 years hunting a very specific kind of young man and who has never been caught, and who may be planning the next one right now. Which of those possibilities you find more frightening probably says more about you than about the case. But neither one, when you sit with it, is easy to live with. The last confirmed drowning that fits the profile happened not long ago. Another young man, another bar, another river, another autopsy, another ruling of accidental death. And according to the researchers who continue to track these cases, another small painted symbol found on a wall not far from where the body came out of the water. Grinning. If this case unsettled you, subscribe to Dark Cases and turn on notifications. Every week we dig into the files police close too quickly. Share this video with someone who still believes in coincidence. And stay with us, because the next case is already waiting.